Good morning. The Hearing Board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is in session. Today is Tuesday, March 26, 2019. The time is just after 9 o'clock a.m., and we are meeting in the Hearing Board room in Diamond Bar. We have one change to the calendar today. Chevron Products Company, case number 831-391 for an emergency variance is off calendar, presumably because they are in compliance. And we have one matter today, which is the short variance request from Del Real LLC, case number 5754-2. And who is representing Del Real today?
Herb Bowden, Jeanette Alvarez, and Armando Ayala.
Good morning. And who is representing the executive officer this morning?
Mary Reichert on behalf of the executive officer.
Thank you. And just to state the obvious, today we are one board member short of a full board, but we do have a quorum, and so we will proceed with a 4-member board this morning. And I will ask anyone who wishes to testify in this matter today for either party or for the public to please rise at this time to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Mr. Bowden, if you can start with an opening statement and just sort of, well, before we do that, would the parties like to incorporate the testimony and evidence from the prior hearing?
Yes, I would.
And Ms. Reichart?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. So then with that in mind, Mr. Bowden, if you could just get us up to date on where Del Real Foods is, and so we are kind of on the same page as you.
Okay, do you want me to summarize what happened, or because it's incorporated, we're all up to speed and just kind of where we're at going forward?
Perhaps just a short reminder of where we are in the matter, and then moving forward today for the 6 findings. That would be helpful.
Okay. So just to refresh everyone's memory without boring you too much, is we had an incident on February 28th at approximately 9:40 p.m., a fire that started in our MPO charbroiling oven, and it moved up into the exhaust system and spread to the exhaust ducts on the roof. Which ultimately reached our electrostatic precipitator, and no one was injured, and we were able to react to the situation. We did believe that we were preventing this by the cleaning procedures we had in place, as well as the frequency of that. And going forward, we're clearly going to be making some changes to make that more robust, that system, as well as the fact that the replacement exhaust system will have a fire suppression system added to it. So the damage was all on the exterior of the building, nothing on the interior. We immediately assessed the situation on Friday, March 1st, so we basically did not run the next day at all. And we realized that the ducts, the exhaust ducts, as well as the ESP was damaged beyond use. And so we contacted the SCAQMD the afternoon of the 1st, which was the very next day, and discussed the protocol for this emergency situation, where we were told to fill out the petition of variance, which we did, and then return it on Tuesday, March 5th, because the office was closed on Monday. Jeanette Alvarez and I did that, and based on our situation, we requested the ex parte emergency variance, which we received on March 6th. So we started to produce on March 6th under complying with the variance agreement, the conditions. Going forward, we definitely felt that the fire was beyond our reasonable control. And that by closing or eliminating the fryers, the product being produced on the fryers, there was going to be a significant burden to our business. It's about 20% of our business is the products that we produce on those fryers, and the estimated losses would have been $8 million plus had we not been able to get the variance. And our estimate of laying off individuals, employees, would have been close to 60 employees that we would have laid off. We have been producing under the conditions of the variance, and I have detail on every one of those conditions where we lie if we wanted to go through that as well, and I have that written down. But we have at all times been within the variance since the 12th when we last came here, and we've made some robust changes to even improve our emissions beyond what we knew at the time on the 12th.
Thank you. And just so we stay on track during testimony and evidence, this board already found beyond reasonable control. This board already found violation. I think the board will most likely need to focus on continuing excess emissions and the timeline from now until completion or being in final compliance, and then we'll have to reweigh for that lengthy or short variance.
Okay.
And also compliance with the, as you just stated, with the conditions of the interim variance.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Reichart, your opening.
Thank you. Subject to the testimony presented here today and compliance with the proposed conditions, the district is not opposed to a granting of this variance, and the district will present the conditions for the short variance at this time.
Thank you. Let's get those passed out. So I believe we're going to mark that proposed conditions for the short variance as B as in boy, Exhibit B for the district.
And just for context for the board, there's no changes, substantive changes. We just redated and named them.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Okay, Mr. Bowden, you may present your first witness, please.
That would be me, I guess. So.
And you did take the oath, right? I didn't.
Yes,
okay.
yes, I did.
I didn't pay attention.
Okay, so did you want me to go through the compliance of the variances first, or just jump right into the timeline of replacing the exhaust and the ESP?
I think it would make sense to go through compliance with the conditions.
Okay. Okay, so I actually have a handout if you want with it that details the compliance to each one.
That will always be helpful.
Okay.
And when this gets handed out, we will mark it as exhibit number 4 for petitioner. And Ms. Reichart has a copy? Okay, thank you. Let's just give a moment for us to get that in front of us.
I don't know, probably see.
Again, that's condition, sorry, that'll be exhibit number 4, and you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. So the first item on here for the variance condition was not to exceed 24,000 pounds combined on both fryer systems 1 and 2, and we have complied to that. We were well under that every day, and in fact, we on fryer 1 over the last 21 days we produced on that only 16 days. So we were below what we would have if we would have produced every day. We did not produce on weekends on that particular fryer. And then fryer 2, we produced 21 days. Point number 2 is we did avoid frying the buche product, which was one of the 4 items that's on the fryer. We took that off, and that was it was about 27,000 pounds that we reduced our throughput on those fryers. Item number 3 is the temperature, that we did maintain the temperature below the 370 degrees Fahrenheit on both systems. The average on fryer 1 was 349 degrees over the 16 days, and on fryer number 2, the average temperature was 362 degrees. Item number 4, we replaced the cooking oil daily, cleaned the metal mesh filters at least every 4 hours on both fryers systems 1 and 2. And we have been replacing the filters weekly. I'll go into more details on the filters in regards to some of the questions that were brought up last time. We did find a better filter system, so I'll go into that in a little bit. Item number 5, daily emissions monitoring according to EPA method 22 has occurred, and Jeanette Alvarez is the individual who's done that, and she reported that and recorded it daily. Item number 6, daily operating log for both fire systems 1 and 2 has been maintained for all required parameters, and the first recorded transmission will be made in compliance to the conditions on April 2nd to Vanessa. Item number 7, communication on the repair process has started, and that was also communicated to the inspector, Vanessa Tanek. Tanek, thank you. And then the last item, number 8, calculating and recording and reporting all excess emissions during the variance period has been done, and we did pay the emission fees to the clerk this morning as required by the conditions March 26.
Thank you. You can proceed with whatever other testimony you wish to give this morning.
Okay. What I'd like to do now is kind of go through, well, there's one or two things. We do have some follow-up items that were requested by the board last time, which is kind of a question and answer scenario. I can go through that, or I can jump right into the timeline of replacing the system.
On replacing the system, yes, we'd
Okay.
like to hear that.
Okay. I'm going to give another handout on this.
Just give a moment for that next exhibit to be circulated. We've received a multiple-page document that begins timeline for repairing ESP and exhaust system phase 1 and 2, and we will mark that as exhibit number 5. And you may proceed.
Okay. The ESP vendor has already shipped. Let me first start with there's really 2 phases here. I think I explained that last time. One was to get the system up and running as soon as possible, and then the second phase was to completely replace the ESP, but it had a order timeline of about 10 to 12 weeks. So we wanted to make sure that we expedite it as quickly as possible, so we're repairing the first system, and then we will actually replace it when the new ESP arrives. So the first phases are the bars here on this Gantt chart that show the dark bars, and that's phase 1. Just to highlight it, our vendor for the ESP, the Smog Hog, is the brand name. They shipped the replacement parts last Friday, the 22nd of March, and then we have a crew that's there this week, basically breaking down the system and getting it ready for the repair parts once they arrive. The second major piece to this Gantt chart is the exhaust system itself on the roof. We have the vendor has been fabricating the exhaust, and they already started to install some of the larger pieces. If you turn to page 2 real quick, the largest single piece is partially installed. It's been placed on the roof. And then I also wanted to point out, because it's open and you can see it, you can see the preparation for the fire suppression that's going to be inside the ducting, and that's the orange circle that's on the second picture on page 2. Real quick, page 3 does show the original damaged part of the ducting that goes into the ESP, and then the picture on the right shows the new piece that's replaced it. And you can also see that it has additional clean-out sections, access panels on the side of it as well. This was the largest piece to be placed, and that's already been done. Going back to page 1, the one item that's I would call the wild card in all this is the drawings and engineering piece. will be submitted this week to the city for permits, and that's the one piece that we anticipated can be anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks to get that permit approved. This is an area where we're using all we can to try to expedite it with the city, but we're kind of at the mercy of their permit process. I would ask, I don't know if there's something that this department can do to expedite that. We will explain to them the situation we're in and why we need it expedited, but again, it's going to be, that's not going to be on our timeline, but the city's. So with the worst case scenario of 3 weeks, we believe that we'll be able to start using the pollution control system by around the 15th to the 18th of April. The phase 2 has already begun. We did order the replacement smog hog, the replacement ESP, on actually March 7th. So you can see we ordered it, and we're waiting for that to arrive, and then the installation would occur fairly quickly once it arrives. We would have to obviously take the whole system down while we swap the two out. The second, I would say, major improvement that we're going to be doing is the fire suppression installation. That's also being designed, and that will also have to have some permits with the fire department, which we think that with the design and the timing that that would coincide, and we wouldn't be hung up by the fire permits on that particular piece of equipment. So all in all, we still feel we're going to be below the 90-day on the permanent fix of the system as well. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the actual filters that we're currently using to improve the emissions and to mitigate it even further. So one of the things that came up in the last hearing was, is there a way to further reduce emissions? And so one of the things is that Armando did is he was able to source a better mesh filter. So we went from an aluminum mesh filter of 1 inch thickness to a stainless steel mesh filter of 2 inch. It's a 2-inch thick filter, and it captures, according to the specifications, 75 to 80% particle matter. And then we also have some redundancy on this. This is on page 4. You can see unfortunately the picture on the left didn't print very well, but you can see the one on the bottom is actually thicker, and it's a finer mesh. And then you can see the redundancy that I pointed out last time where we have 2 filters. And I'd like to point out that all the calculations were based on a mitigation of 50% PM capture, and we believe that we're getting at least 75 to 80 per filter, but we're actually doubled up. So we feel that we've done a extended reduction of capturing PMs by switching to this new filter. We did look at a carbon filter that you recommended last time, and it was a disposable filter. The temperature rating was only to 109 degrees. It would still fall within, the temperature wouldn't be an issue, but according to the vendor, the VOCs really wouldn't be trapped in this filter. You would have to have literally hundreds of them in series, according to the vendor. So because we found the 2-inch stainless steel that had significant improvement, we felt that on the PMs, we felt that was still an improvement. And then the product mitigation by reducing the buche throughput also overall reduced the or further mitigated our emissions. And that kind of takes us up to the present on our timeline for repairing the ESP and the exhaust system.
Thank you very much. Ms. Reichart, do you have questions for Mr. Bowden?
Yes, is the replacement system identical to the previous system you had?
The smog hog itself,
Yes.
I believe it's an apples to apples. There's probably some improvements because it's newer, but it's going to be the same. And I'll refer that to Armando
Okay.
if more detail
Well,
is
it's
needed.
just, if there's any difference in model number or any, at all anything slightly different, we would need an updated permit. So would you be willing to add that as a condition, that you submit the permit very quickly with expedited, in order to get that processed in time to expedite the replacement?
Absolutely. I think we realized that, and that's why we did request the same unit, but Armando,
We'll ask Armando
I
for
can
those
just ask
details. Well, we can ask him when he's, okay. Okay, and that's all the questions I had, thank you.
Well, there will be another witness for excess emissions calculation, is there?
no, it's Janeth will be the witness for that if you have questions on
Yes.
the calculations.
Okay, I'll wait for that then. You mentioned the city permits that are necessary, and that you're expediting as much as you can. Can you request expedited processing through the city?
I don't know the answer to that. I think Armando will be able to, once we go to him, if you can repeat that question for him.
Okay. I'll save that question then. And did you say, okay, so your estimate based on, I guess, Exhibit 5, is that the repair, the first repair, that will be done, you said, between April 15th and 18th? That's your estimate?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, and then what is the date that you're estimating? I can't really tell from Exhibit 5 for the replacement.
It's on or about, it's May 5th to the 8th. It kind of falls in that timeline. I don't have an exact day. It was kind of a range.
And what, today, are you asking the length of the short variance so that you know you can comfortably be in compliance by the
And
end?
I still wanted to ask for the full 90 days
full
just
90
in
days.
case. Yeah, permits are the thing that's going to potentially hold us up, even on that, as far as because we're putting the fire suppression system in. So we think that we have the right timing with the fire department, because that will require fire department permits. But we have been hung up in the past with fire department permits just because of their load or I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
They're on their own timeline.
So it would be more along the lines of 90 days or final compliance, whichever occurs first?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I think I have one other question, and that is, I noticed on Exhibit B, the new proposed short variance conditions, I don't see the not frying the boucher.
If I may interrupt, I
Okay.
printed out the wrong version. I'm having somebody fix that and bring down the right version. So that is my mistake,
Because
sorry.
it sounded like in your testimony that you were fully prepared to continue with that, is that correct? Fully prepared to continue, if feasible, petitioner shall not fry its
yeah,
boucher? Okay.
yes, yeah, we've already made that decision and we've already moved on
Okay,
from
great.
that internally, yeah.
Oh, and just to be clear on the record, I think your testimony made this very clear, both the pictures and the timeline, but in your summary, Exhibit number 4, in your summary of compliance variance conditions, number 7, it seems to imply that the communication regarding the repair process started, but in fact, you communicated that the repair process in fact started. Is that correct? It's already under repair. that
Yes,
part.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I apologize. What wasn't done is we didn't communicate it directly to the inspector, so that, it's just to show that we're in compliance, but we started the repair literally on the 7th. We started demolition, and so yes, to answer your question, we absolutely have begun the repair process.
Okay. Any board members, any other questions? Mr. Balagopalan, and then I think Ms. Bird has questions.
Mr. Bode, this new unit that you ordered, the ESP from United Air Specialists, right? Does it have the feature to clean it daily, or
It does, as did the other one.
as did the other one? Okay, so there was a daily cleaning.
No, there wasn't a daily cleaning. We basically, I believe the frequency on that was monthly.
Monthly?
We're certainly we're certainly going to make that system more robust in the cleaning frequency. Again, that's not where the fire originated, but
Right.
certainly if it's cleaner, it's less likely to have a problem. But we are going to, in that whole exhaust system, have a fire suppression system that we haven't had in the past. But it will definitely, we will definitely increase the frequency of the cleaning.
And there are no changes to the RTO, basically?
No, the RTO was not damaged, and it's still in great shape, and so there was no issue with the RTO.
And you're not changing I know you said it was oversized, 125 horsepower in your permit, nothing, you're not changing the blower or anything?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
No, we're not.
It does, I think Ms. Reichert asked about the permits, and so you're going to be prepared to submit the application very quickly?
Yes, and I guess I need some clarification. If it's identical, do we still need to do that if it's a replacement piece of equipment? I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Can I advise, or do you want my engineer to testify? Do you want us to talk off the record on that?
Actually, 219 is the language on that, so I was going to look it up real quick on what there's function identical and there's identical, there's two different things. So, there's an exemption if it's functionally identical, but that's not the issue. I think it's identical, it has to be, exactly the same. So if there's any change, it's a different make, model, it's no longer identical. So they'll have to apply for a new permit then.
Ms. Reichert?
Yeah, our engineer has advised me that it'd be advisable to apply for the permit, and if it is truly identical and no changes need to be made, the permit would be rejected by our team because no changes need to be made, but.
Okay, we'll definitely, whatever's more conservative, the high road, whatever we'll do, we'll obviously comply, so we'll make sure we do that. Yeah.
And if when the new permit has been processed, if the permitting team put a requirement to do some source testing, is that something that you're willing to do?
Yes, in fact, that came up during the last hearing, and the question was, is Del Real Foods looking into testing for emissions after a new system is installed? And we absolutely are. We've already talked to Advanced Environmental Compliance. This is the source testing and engineering firm that we're going to use. They've already been out to our location, and they did a pre-walk, and then they will be supporting the test once the new ESP and exhaust system is in place. So we will repeat the testing with the new equipment.
Right. Is that factored in your timeline?
No, because the system's going to be in place and activated, and they'll do the testing after it's fully in use.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Byrd?
I think just about all my questions were answered, but I just wanted to confirm that there's no connection between the permit application for the city and the fire department, is there?
No, they're two separate permits.
So they're being kind of done simultaneously, but not connected to each other.
Yeah, there's some overlap for sure, but they're not connected.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator, do you have a question?
You changed the filter from 1 inch to 2 inches, is that correct?
Yes.
And it's already been incorporated in the system?
Yes.
Okay. At some point in time, the filter was supposed to screen out the particulates that might be emitted into the atmosphere, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and also, on the roof, as I recall, some of the particulates would be suppressed and land on top of the roof. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, now, what are you doing about that on a daily basis?
We have a sanitation person pretty much up there the whole time we're producing, and they're constantly cleaning the filters as well as cleaning the rooftop itself in that area. And even though the variant says every 4 hours, we're actually cleaning it at a higher frequency just to be safe.
What do you mean higher frequency?
We're cleaning it every hour to every 2 hours.
All right. Did you notice any substantial difference in the particulates being suppressed and landing in the roof when you change from 1 inch filter to 2 inches?
I'll defer that to my colleagues here. I don't know the answer to that, so if we can ask them after we move.
Summary of compliance to variance condition, number 7. You began communications already, right?
Yes.
What is the estimated date? You may have mentioned it already, to anticipate the completion of the project.
On phase 1, but between the 15th and the 18th of April. Phase 2 around the 5th to the 8th of May.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any other questions, Senator?
No, ma'am.
Anyone else have any questions?
I had
Ms.
one
Reichardt.
brief follow-up, if that's okay. The condition as it was written from the previous variance had listed, if feasible, you would not fry the boucher product. Is it your testimony now that it is feasible for you not to fry the boucher product? So we could remove that phrase, or has that full determination not been made yet?
We actually are still, we're producing buche, but we're not frying it. We're just bypassing the frying process, and we had approval. It's basically 2 customers that purchased that item, and we showed them, because we used to not fry that item years ago, and so we showed them the different version, and they actually said, no, we'll be happy to change. And so we're not, to answer the question, we're not going to fry that during the time we're under this variance. So
Perfect.
I don't know how that.
That's the answer. I'm sorry if my question was too convoluted. That's the answer I was looking for.
I think the proposal will be to reinsert that condition without the words "if feasible."
Okay.
And that's okay?
Yep, we will accept that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And I have the updated conditions if you'd like me to present them.
Sure, and
But it still says feasible.
if feasible, you want to put them in. And we'll mark that as C as in cow, carrot.
And then for condition number 2, we'd remove if feasible at the beginning and change the word interim to short, because that was not changed.
Okay, so we're marking these as C, Exhibit C, and we're removing in number 2 the words "if feasible," and we're removing, where do you see interim variance?
At the end
Oh.
of number 2.
Okay, thank you. So during the short variance period, not interim. Thank you. Okay, so are there any other questions for Mr. Bowden? Okay, Mr. Bowden, you may introduce again your second or your next witness.
Okay, you had some questions on the actual calculations, so I'm going to go ahead and let Jeanette answer those questions. Jeanette Alvarez.
And I'm sorry, if you could just reintroduce yourself and state for the record that you took the oath, and then as you present any excess emission calculations, just if you can make sure that you're getting it from the different phases of when phase 1 is, from now till when phase 1 is finished, and from phase 1 to when phase 2 is completed, if there's any change in excess emissions as a result. Would you like to go off the record, or are you, bless you, or are you?
Can I say something?
Yes.
Okay, it was just some confusion. Once phase 1 is complete, we're going to be utilizing the system. So really, there's no difference between phase 1 and phase 2 in emissions, is all.
When we're calculating excess emissions, it's over the entire term of the short variance. So if the short variance begins today, from today until April 15th to 18th, you're going to have a certain amount of excess emissions. And then once that phase 1 is in place, you're going to have different excess emissions, I assume. Am I wrong?
No, it will be different. It will be back to the 95% containment.
Okay, so that's what I think we'll
Okay,
need
all
to
right,
hear.
all right. Sorry
Thank you.
about the confusion.
Hi, my name's Janeth Alvarez, and I did take the oath today. Do you need me to spell out my name? Janeth, Janeth, last name Alvarez, Alvarez. As presented during our last variance hearing, with the changes that were made during the hearing, we will, during this phase up to the point that the ESP is temporarily repaired, be emitting VOC emission and PM emission at 19.76 pounds per day on VOCs and 12 pounds per day on PM emissions. After the system is temporarily repaired, we hope to be back on the 95% reduction that we were on previously. Now, with the new filter, the emission calculation that was provided during the last hearing was also based on a 50% reduction. It is 75%. I do not have those new calculations here with me today, as we are continuing to base it on the 50% reduction from the last emission testing that was provided.
Thank you. Ms. Reckart, do you have questions?
No questions.
Mr. Balagopalan?
Ms. Alvarez, so you will continue in the excess emission based on the 50% then?
Yes.
Okay. Emission monitoring, I know that's one of the conditions. So have you been doing the emission monitoring, the visible emission as per Method 22?
Yes, I have.
Had you had occasion to call the district and report any excess smoke? And I know you did it once when at the last time you testified.
We called, I believe it was 2 additional more times after that. During one of the last event, it was very windy. We had a high wind in Miraloma, and there was just a lot of smoke that was observed. We looked at the frying temperatures, and everything was below the 370 degrees. That was agreed upon. So we presumed that it was just the circulation of the air above. Filters were cleaned out immediately. During that particular time that we were doing the emission observations, Fryer 1 had no product flow, and Fryer 2 did have product flow, but the temperature was way below. One of the things that we've realized during the observations is that when we are passing product through the fryers, the temperature drops significantly as well, which also helps. So we did look at all the observations from below to make sure that everything was compliance, but we still called it in for record keeping.
Is this before you added the stainless steel 2-inch filters or after?
I believe those were added about a week and a half ago, so this was after.
Oh, it was after. So even with the 2-inch filter, you still had some visible emissions?
Yeah, it looked like steam, but because there was more than there typically was, and once again, assuming that it was because of the high winds, we're not experts, so we just wanted to make sure that we were in compliance, and we called it in.
Did any inspector or anybody come to verify or anything like that?
No, we did get a confirmation number, and we did advise that it was a very windy day, and explained the reason for calling in.
I had a question, I forgot about it. Okay, no, thank you very much.
Other questions for Ms. Alvarez? Senator?
You said the emission level was based on 50%, I think, did you say something like that?
Yes, the previous calculation was on a 50%.
Right. And that's with the 1-inch filter or 2-inch filter?
That was with the 1-inch filter.
But no calculation since you've installed the 2-inch filter?
We have not done the calculations for the new filters, no.
When were they installed?
I will defer that question to Armando because I believe he has the exact date.
Let me give you a quick answer on that so I can move on.
We haven't introduced another witness. Can we just,
I
we'll
know,
have
but
to,
the continuity of the conversation.
I understand that. Okay. You want to go to another witness just for that one question? That seems
Yeah,
to
that
be
one question, yeah.
fine. Let's introduce the next witness, please.
I am really sorry. We had a follow-up question for Ms.
We're not
Alvarez.
done.
Oh, we're not done.
I have
We're just
questions to Ms.
going.
We're just
Oh,
jumping because we have one question to answer. Okay. Please introduce yourself, spell your name, and say that you took the oath.
Armando Ayala, Armando Ayala, Ayala, and I took the oath.
Did
Can
you
you
hear the
please answer that
question?
one question?
Yeah, those filters were installed a week and a half ago. After the last hearing on the Friday, that's when we got them.
Thank you. I'm going to return to Ms. Alvarez because I do not want to muddy the testimony. Thank you.
Then when you expect to do your calculation again to determine the emission level?
At this time, we were going to maintain with the 50% reduction that we had provided, but if we can submit the calculations with the 75%, we can also do that.
Well, your expectation is you get better levels if you were to calculate at this point in time with the 2-inch filter.
That's correct. We were still under the minimum, so we really didn't know if submitting the new calculations would support.
And by the minimum, you mean for emission fees,
That's
you're under
correct.
the minimum daily, so you'd be paying a higher amount anyway.
That's correct.
I asked a question, and maybe you're the person to answer it. Have you noticed any significant difference of the particulates on the rooftop since you put the 2-inch in?
As I've been doing the observations, in my perspective, yes, there is more improvement. As I observe, when the stacks are in operation or when the fryers are in operation, the airflow seems to be more cleaner. And we also have less particulate matter that's coming out of the stacks.
Okay, question, maybe you can answer it or not. The temperature, where you operated at a certain temperature, when those particulates hit the roof from the stack and land, they still, any estimate of the temperature level at that point in time of the particulates?
No.
Okay.
I can probably pass that question on to Armando.
Not now, please. We'll wait till Mr. Armando. Not Mr. Armando. Ayala, thank you. Testifies.
Would one expect or believe the case would be that if the temperature is somewhat elevated, then a lot of the emission would still be emitted into the atmosphere before it hits the surface of the roof?
I would not know that.
Because that's what we're concerned about, the emission level as it being dispersed into the atmosphere. Some of you, these are questions being raised, and probably suggestion is something you probably should look into. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Byrd?
Just to clarify, the 75% reduction versus the 50% reduction with the new filters, that's based on information from the manufacturer of the filters?
That's correct, based on the specifications.
And so the specifications, so you provided them with information on your current use, and then they told you that this would be better based on the specifications.
Armando can confirm that. He's the one that searched it out, but on the specifications, I have observed, I have reviewed them, and it does state 75 to 80%.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify. So your testimony is that today you're presenting that up until approximately, let's say, April 18th, you're going to go with the 50% the numbers that we already had for the interim variance as excess emissions. And then after that, it's your testimony, there will be no excess emissions, even though you're not in, you don't have a, it's just the temporary fix at this point, but it's still no excess emissions.
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Balagopalan.
Ms. Alvarez, how long does the product stay in the fryer? Is what you're doing flash frying, or is it, how long does the product stay in the fryer as it goes through?
It's continuous flow of product, so it's a stop and go process. It's we do our cooking by batches, so it just depends on how fast they're feeding the product into the line, but it's continuous on and off.
Is that a flash? Is that considered flash dry?
Yes.
Okay. And then you freeze it right after that? Is that what you do? Or you cool it down and then
It's further cooked after that.
further cooked after that? Oh, where do you cook after that?
That is cooked in kettles.
Okay. And then later, I mean, you freeze it then, right, for shipping?
Yes, it's cooked, packed, and then it is cooled. We don't freeze it.
You don't freeze it? Oh, okay, it's cool. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Alvarez? Yes, Senator.
If you can answer this, maybe the district engineer can. When that particulates emitted from the filter before it hits the roof, and whatever emission is being dispersed at that time, is that known as outgassing?
Can you repeat, did you say eye-gassing?
Yeah, outgassing.
Yes.
And that's what goes, that's the emission that goes into the atmosphere. That's what you're talking about. That's outgassing. Technically.
I
You don't
would not know that.
Fine, that's outgassing. Thank you.
Ms. Reichart?
I had a brief follow-up question.
Sure, that's on.
Do you have the notification number from the notification you called in, the visible emissions?
Yes. To clarify, is that the confirmation number or the actual number to call in?
The confirmation number.
It was on 3/14, and the confirmation number is 552836.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for Ms. Alvarez before we move to the next witness? Okay, we had a few questions, I believe, that could be covered by the next witness. Do you wish to have them repeated? Why don't you give whatever testimony is there any testimony you wish to give before additional questions are asked?
No, I think Herb about and cover everything we did already.
Okay. Ms. Reichart, do you have additional questions?
Do you have the specifications for the replacement small cog?
Yes, I do. I don't have it with me right here, but I could
Okay.
send it to you.
Okay.
It's exactly the same model. This size of ESP are custom made. So if we would have done a new one, we had to do the whole re-engineering of it. But because Small Hog already has everything, it was easy to do. So they're just building it based on our previous engineering documents that we had.
Okay. Nonetheless, are you still willing to submit
Yes,
the
of course.
application, and then we'll verify all of that?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions, Mr. Ayala. The city permits that are necessary, just so I'm clear, that's for the repair work that you're doing, phase one, or?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And
Because everything that we construct in the building has to be permitted by the city.
okay, thank you. And then, are you aware of whether there is expedited review available with the city?
We have done it in the past. We're gonna submit it over the counter, so that's why we believe we could do it in less than 3 weeks.
Okay, so, but is there expedited review available?
Not that I know, but if we do it over the counter, they'll help us to, they will review it faster.
What does that mean exactly, over the counter?
Well, actually, I'm not the one, our architect is the one that submits everything, but in the past, we have done it, and that's helps us expedite the process. That's the term they use with us. I don't really know what's the process, but we're gonna do it the same this time.
Okay, and do you know when is the soonest you could submit those permits and when you plan to do so?
And if you see on the timeline, we have a plan for tomorrow. We're trying to finish today all the engineering documents, and we're gonna probably be ready by tomorrow.
Okay, so I see, city permit, so that's approximately tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so the plan is tomorrow to do this over-the-counter method, and it's your understanding that in the past, that has resulted in approximately 3-week turnaround?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Sorry.
I think over the counter, I mean, you wait for it while you're standing there. And just, is that correct when you expedite it, when you're over the counter?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
That would be a long wait,
Yeah.
3 weeks. Mr. Balagopalan.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ayala, on the wash system you have, what is the current wash system you have for washing the ESP?
on the ESP?
Yes, on the
Oh,
ESP.
it's manually washed. The system comes with the drains ready to. It doesn't have a internal wash. It's a manual. What we're doing this time is we're ordering extra sets of filters and cells, so that way we just take them out, put the new ones in, and we wash them outside. So that's how it's going to be this time. The process, we're going to buy extra set of cells to make the sanitation cleaning more efficient.
Yeah, so that appears it might be a change from existing configuration that might require a permit then.
Oh, no. The system is the same. The only thing that will change is how fast we could do all that sanitation process, because before we have to take the cells out, the filters and the merge filters and the pre-filters out and wash them outside. But now with the new system, we're buying an extra set of filters and cells, so we could just take them out.
Oh, and put the other
And
one.
then put
Oh,
the-
I see.
the-
Okay, I
and-
misunderstood.
yeah.
Okay. But there is no drum, it's a solution that,
It's a sanitation cleaning process. I don't really know what chemical we use, but it has all the drain, and all that drain goes pump into our lard, our excess grease that goes out, and we dispose.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Ayala? Senator.
This emission level, visible monitoring, can you see it with the naked eye?
Well, I don't do the observations, but I've seen improvement after we did the 2-inch filters.
With your naked eye?
Yes.
You don't measure it, no device to measure it.
We don't.
You ever heard the word outgassing before?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to be clear, on a day-to-day basis, you do not observe visible emissions? I don't mean you, Mr. Ayala, do that. I'm just wondering, condition number 5 was conducting visible emissions monitoring, and maybe we should go back to Ms. Alvarez, but the testimony was that it was only observed 2 times. And so the question is there visible emissions other than those 2 times? And because your answer to the last
Yeah,
question
I would defer that question
implied.
to Mrs. Alvarez. She's the one that does the observations.
Okay, then I will wait just to see if there's any other questions for Mr. Ayala. Okay. Ms. Alvarez, if you can answer that, because that made it a little unclear.
Yes, I think my colleague He monitors not as I do with method 22 as required by our variance condition. I am the one that goes up and monitors daily.
Okay, so just to be clear on the record, are there visible emissions daily or just the 2 times during the interim variance that was called into the district?
The times that we have called into the actual district,
Okay, and otherwise, you don't see on a daily basis visible emissions?
I do not.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Mr. Balagopalan?
Actually, just a further clarification. So you do daily observations, but those were the 2 times you saw visible smoke that you called it in?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bowden, any additional affirmative testimony you'd like to give?
The only thing I wanted to emphasize is either Armando or somebody from our company will accompany the architect tomorrow to the city so that we make sure that they understand the urgency of this. So we're not just going to leave it up to our architect. Just even if I go, someone will accompany the architect tomorrow.
Thank you, that's very good to hear on the board. Okay, Ms. Reichart, are you planning to introduce any witnesses?
No, unless the district, or unless the board has specific questions.
I did have one question. I don't know if other board members do. The one question I had is whether there's anyone who could confirm the understanding of the district that after Phase 1 is in place, that there are no excess emissions expected.
Okay, the district calls Shannon Lee. Oh, is it on? Can you please, there you go. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Shannon Lee, Shannon Shannon, Lee, Lee.
And did you take the oath this morning?
Yes, I did.
And what's your position here at the district?
I'm a senior air quality engineer.
Okay, and did you hear the question posed?
Yes, I did.
Can you please answer it?
Once the repairs are made, there should not be any excess emissions because the equipment should be operating as we permitted.
Thank you. Any other questions on that, or any other questions for Ms. Lee? Well, let me just make sure, Mr. Bowden, did you have any questions on that?
No,
Okay,
I'm good.
Senator, go ahead.
You ever heard the term eye-gassing?
I have not.
Okay. When you have the emission that's being suspended into the atmosphere, what we're concerned, that's what we're concerned about,
Yes.
level of the emission. There's a term called efflorescent and deliquescent. And when you efflorescent, you kicking it off. That's what, from outgassing it being emitted into the atmosphere. So those particulates have a certain temperature. And at that temperature level, that's when they emit gases, or the emission levels, or the emission. Is that correct? Based on the temperature.
The temperature does play a factor into how many emissions are coming out.
And that doesn't have to, does it tell you how, also create, a fact is how much emission being emitted to the atmosphere as well? What's coming out is out.
Right. Whatever is being emitted to the atmosphere is coming out.
Right.
Right. I'm not understanding the question.
Right, never mind. Thank you.
Okay.
Is whatever is being emitted in the process of the burning of oils and the cooking of food, that goes through the control system, the ESP,
Correct.
is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so when we're saying that up until Phase 1 is done, there's a certain expected excess emissions, that takes care of all excess emissions
Correct.
from the frying process. And when we say after Phase 1 is completed and the repairs are done, there should be no excess emissions, that means it's in compliance with, there are emissions, correct?
There are emissions, but nothing's being vented directly to the atmosphere after all the control's been repaired. Everything's going to be fed through the ESP, then the RTO, and then from there, there will be some emissions, but those will all be controlled at the 95%.
That was my next question, so it'll be 95% control. Mr. Balagopalan?
Ms. Lee, just as a clarification, so Phase 2 actually ends sometime in early May. When you say repair, that's when the new ESP is installed and operating.
My understanding is they're repairing their current system right now. That's part of phase 1. So phase 2 is when they're bringing in the new system. Is that?
Okay.
Are they in compliance as of the end of phase 1?
With current district permits, yes. Once that is repaired, then they'll be back into compliance. Now, if they choose to change the equipment, that's when the new application would be needed, and we could reevaluate at that time.
Did you have additional questions?
Oh,
Nick?
yeah,
Well-
sorry. The, do you look up the section in the rule tonight, where they may require a permit?
I couldn't find it really quick when I just checked on my phone right now.
Okay. So once they submit the specification, you'll look and see if it's, if they
Correct.
would.
And if it is identical and doesn't require a permit, we could reject it at the time. But if there is a change, then we'd have the application in hand, so we could process it as it should be.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Berg?
And, excuse me, and after completion of phase 1, they still have to do a source test, which would take more, which would be several weeks out before you get the,
No, if they choose to replace their current system, that replacement would need a source test.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay,
once they
so-
repair, no.
So once they replace that, which currently is scheduled for early May, then they need a source test.
Correct.
So we'll need time after that to get the source test and results
If they
back.
replace, yes.
But is the source test, would that be part of their permit requirement?
It'll be a permit condition.
So would
at
they,
that po-
they
at
still
that
be,
point.
I'm sorry, I don't want to talk over you.
Sorry.
Would they be in compliance once they've replaced? First of all, I have a question as to whether they're in compliance well before that, but assuming they had to replace to be in compliance, once the replacement is done, that's full compliance? Or is a source test required to be in full compliance?
My understanding is they're repairing the current system. So once that repair is done, they're in compliance with current conditions. Now, if they replace, then, and we can, if we permit them, we would put a source test condition. So we would issue a permit to construct first with the source test condition, wait for the source test. If it passes the source test, then we would issue a permit to operate, and then they could fully use that new system.
I think the question was, if I can help, is that during that period of time after the permit to construct is issued, while we're awaiting the source test, is the facility in compliance during that interim period until the source test comes in?
Yes.
Okay, but I go back to my original question. I don't know if Ms. Lee should answer this question or someone else because it's a legal question or not, but is a short variance needed past April 15th to 18th when phase 1 is done and Ms. Lee has testified that the facility is in compliance? And I think Mr. Bowden's answer will be based upon the district's answer, I would assume, but.
The only reason I think that we would want the short variance for the full 90 days is in case something comes up with any of the permits or any other unforeseen issue as things happen when you're doing these kind of projects. So that's the only reason, if we could put it in as a contingent or worded in conditions, you know, sooner, if it happens sooner, then clearly we want to, you know, we would want to have that completed. The reason we're doing 2 phases, we could just say, let's just go with phase 2 and not repair the current ESP. The reason we're repairing the current ESP, which costs us a lot more money to do, is so that we can reduce emissions sooner than later, knowing that phase 2 is the more permanent fix, and that by repairing the current system, we didn't want to repair something that should be replaced. And the vendor said that ultimately it should be replaced. They said the repair will work, but it's not recommended for long term. So we're really doing this in 2 phases to try to comply faster.
Do understand that. Just want
Okay, I
to
just
understand
wanna-
whether you really need it or not.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Do you have a conservative date of when you think, with all these contingencies and potential setbacks and permitting delays, that the repair portion would be done? Do you think you would need the full 90 days as that contingency, or is there a somewhat shorter period of time to allow for potential delays in the repair process?
It's difficult to answer. The way I've seen projects go is I would rather be very conservative and have the ability to still be within the parameters of a short variance of 90 days. Does that answer your question? I just,
Maybe we have someone else that could answer.
Perhaps let me ask a question. Would you be willing, you testified, Mr. Bowden, that you would personally accompany your architect to the city tomorrow. If it's a definite that you're going to be applying for the permits for the city tomorrow, would you agree to a condition for that? And then there would be no worries on the part of this board that you're not moving forward as quickly as possible, and I think there would be less hesitation to give a short variance that could last 90 days.
yes.
Okay, so the answer is yes, okay. Is there? Or we could say by the end of the week, or we could say within a week.
Within, by the end of the week, because who knows, things come up.
That's right.
That's what the architect's saying, but there could be something.
Okay.
I had a question
Mr.
for Mr.
Balagopala,
Ayala.
and then Senator.
Mr. Ayala, what is involved in the repair of the ESP, the current ESP? What are they doing?
Yeah, the repair is, the house, everything was damaged. We salvaged the housing a little bit, so that way, in the new system that we're ordering, we're pre-shipping the pre-filters, the mesh filters, and the cells. And we're gonna use them, we're gonna repair this unit, we're gonna clean it, and we're gonna use it in this system.
And when you say this system, you mean the
housing of the small cog. Once we get the new small cog, we're gonna have to swap the unit.
Completely.
And to do that, we kind of need 5 days to do it. So during those 5 days, we will need to shut down the system. That's why we probably need the 90 days to be in compliance.
Well,
So.
oh wait, are you planning, just to be clarify that, are you shutting down just the ESP system, or are you shutting down the fryers during that 5 days?
Yeah, we have to shut down the ESP to do the installation of the new system.
And do you plan to run the fryers for 5 days without being hooked up to anything? Or are you shutting down the fryers as well for the 5 days?
Yeah, that. When we do the ESP swap, we will need to shut down the ESP, and because it's
But not the fryers.
well, that's why we need the 90 days.
Okay, that's different than what's been testified to.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, let's just to clean it up. We're done with Ms. Lee, is that correct?
Actually, I haven't finished.
I'm sorry, I know we're jumping around a lot, and it was my fault, because I thought we were done with Ms. Lee, and I wanted to know whether a short variance, when it should end. But let's finish up with Ms. Lee, and then we'll go back to this.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's
I
okay.
just, it was going all over the place, and what my understanding is, and I just, sometimes when I say it out loud, it makes more sense to me. What my understanding was then, that when the repairs are done, they're in compliance. If they, for whatever reason, when they submit their application for a permit to you, and you reject it, if you reject it, then everything is back to normal.
Correct.
Okay,
Sorry,
so.
yes.
But if it's not, then they would have a permit. If you accepted it, it would be a temporary permit to operate anyway. That's what we're saying? Mm-hmm. Okay, just wanted to walk through that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Lee?
Yes.
For Ms. Lee?
For Ms. Lee, yes.
Okay.
So, Ms. Lee, just so we clarify, so if there is no requirement right now in the existing permit to do any kind of testing, correct?
Correct.
And if they rebuild the existing ESP, they do not have to do the tests,
Correct.
right? But if they needed if they need a permit for the new one, then your testimony is that you will put a condition to do the testing.
Correct, because it's a new unit.
It's a new unit, but short of that, let's say if they don't need a permit because they're exempt under 219, then any testing they do is something voluntary that they're going to do.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Lee before we go back to petitioners? Senator, did you have a question for Ms. Lee?
Right, I think you just testified early on that Phase 1 expected completion date is
Wait,
April
wait,
15th.
is this for Ms. Lee of the district?
No, not Ms. Lee.
Okay, then hold your question, okay. Why don't we step back, let us take a quick, well, not a quick, let's take a break, because it's 10:15, and allow petitioners to regroup and consider what it is they're asking, so that we know whether or not you want it for the full 90 days, why, and what will occur during that 90 days. And then we'll come back, and I know all the board members have various questions for various witnesses, but let's narrow the field. So let's take a little more than 15 minutes, and we'll come back at 10:30, and then we'll reconvene back with petitioner. We're off the record. Okay, we are back on the record. Should we hear from the parties before we ask more additional questions? Mr. Bowden, did you?
Yeah,
Sorry.
probably makes
Go ahead.
sense, yeah. Okay, so going back to the two phases, and there was some confusion on our side, obviously. So I thought it was a day or two to switch these two systems out when we get the new ESP. It will take, Armando did call them during the break. They think they can do it in 3 days, but it could take up to 5, depending on if they run into any difficulties. We cannot not produce during those 5 days if it goes that long. What we would plan to do is go basically out of variance again during that time frame. We'll be in variance when we get the system repaired. We would be in compliance until we swap the two out. We would then go to the current system that we have where we're bypassing the air pollution control system, but we're still using the mesh screens to mitigate, and then we would reduce our throughput just to those orders that are, I would consider, urgent. We would still facilitate the swap out of the two units by getting the crane there in advance, by having them work, potentially 2 shifts, things like that, to try to mitigate the number of days that we would fall back out of compliance. And then when the two are swapped out, then we would be, back into full compliance. So there was a little bit of confusion on that on our side. I thought it was much faster than that. So with that being said, then it does make sense for us to have the full 90-day short variance in place.
Okay, there'll be a number of questions, including during that up to 5 days. Will there be, is it 50% controlled? What are we looking at for those excess emissions?
Between the repaired unit and then the 5 days, or during the 5 days?
During the 5 days when you are rerouting emissions and you are swapping into the new
Yeah,
system.
it would be identical to what we're emitting today outside of our permit variant, or on the permit variance. And it's, again, it's still calculated at the 50% range and not the 75% on the PM. So that's what I would call worst case scenario, but it would be the same as today, nothing above that.
Okay, and then you've got condition number 1, which would limit your operations for the entire short variance period. Is that what you're asking
It
for?
would still be that same condition, yes.
Okay, so even once the repair occurs?
I would just stay with it so that there's no confusion. We could still maintain under those conditions, yes.
Okay, Ms. Reichart?
I was just going to suggest if there was a way to craft the variance where we're, during a 90-day period, they have kind of 2 variance periods to allow for the repairs to take place first and then the replacement at a later time. And then that would also make sure that the variance is as narrowly crafted as possible. So the variance, if that makes sense.
So the variance would need to take into account the repair period, so phase 1 is completed, and then it would have to be this 5 or so day window just during the actual physical well, okay, it would be it would be the same idea. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but what parts, you're just talking about, when we talk about the term, we'd have to break it up into those phases and talk about excess emissions, or any part of the conditions would be different?
I mean, from the district's perspective, once they're in compliance after the repair is done, we wouldn't necessarily need these conditions to be in effect during the period of time when they are not needing variance coverage. But so from the district's perspective, we can carve that period of time out. But that's our perspective.
Can we say something along the lines for condition number 1, for any day petitioner is not in full compliance with district rules and regulations,
That would
et
be,
cetera, et cetera?
that would be acceptable.
Okay, did we have any additional questions we need to answer? Mr. Balagopalan, Mr. Balagopalan, and who did you want to ask the question of?
I was going to ask Mr. Ayala, actually. Yep, Mr. Ayala, I'm a little confused. The existing vent, where you're putting the temporary trays, and that's separate from where the ductwork is going to be? Because do you have to remove that to put the new ductwork?
No, that will not be removed.
Where is this exhaust?
The ducts that are damaged is a little bit after that point.
Right, but the emissions are now, the exhaust that where you put this, the dual filter on page 4, where's the exhaust? Or where did you put it on?
That was already there. It's an existing ducts that we had it there.
So, I'm sorry, oh, it's an existing
Yeah.
duct? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, we only added those to the blowers that were on the top.
So previously, it was there, but air was not flowing out through there?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, and then you opened it to put
We-
this
yeah.
temporary duct?
That's what we call it, we did a bypass.
Okay, you did a bypass, okay.
So,
all right.
so even right now, we putting the new ducts in, it'll be after that point.
Okay.
So that will not be removed when we do the swap.
So during the 5 days on the swap, this will be in operation?
That's right.
Okay.
The same condition as right now.
Okay, all right, okay, I got it. All right, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Sorry, Senator, do you have a question?
I had a question pending before we took the recess. And because I was told you couldn't go from responding to the petitioner, and let's take a recess.
Who would you like to ask the question of?
Well, I know, I'm just thinking, making a point, and when he came back, my question is still on the table, and it was with the petitioner.
Okay, and that was the point. The point was to go off, have the petitioner finalize what their request is, and then to have board members ask questions.
Yeah, no, you go back to the previous question.
Okay,
And
so
the
can you
question is-
restate the question, and who is it for?
Petitioner,
Anyone who can answer it, or is it for Mr. Ayala or Mr. Bowden?
Mr. Bowden, I mean.
Bowden, sorry.
I was gonna say, because the question was asked during the discussion, it was raised about the timeline for phase 1. But you previously stated, and maybe somebody didn't remember, that you said it'd be completed the 15th of April. That's your estimated target date for phase 1.
Yes, that is kind of a range, but yeah, 15th through the 18th.
Yeah, and you also said then for phase 2, of possibly the 15th of May.
The 5th through the 8th of May
The
is kind of
5th,
the
8th
final.
of May.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So, and any testing that'll be done would be on phase 2, but not on phase 1.
That's
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Let me ask you another question. On the EPA method 22 for emission monitoring, I mean, that's new to me. Could you tell me something about it?
I would have to defer that to Jeanette because she's the one who's been trained on that monitoring system. Not me. I know enough to be dangerous, so I'm going
Whoever
to
can
let her.
answer from your side.
That's fine. At this point, whoever can, just identify yourself when you speak so that the record is clear, the audio record is clear. But at this point, I think we can ask whoever can answer the questions.
My name's Janet Alvarez, and I'll be answering the senator's question. Method 22, we took the instructions that are listed on the AQMD site. I guess a brief explanation on the method that we do is we have to use 2 stopwatches. One would monitor or would calculate the time that we're actually doing the emission, which is at least for 5 minutes, the minimum. And the second stopwatch would be to monitor emissions that are any observed emissions during that time of 5 minutes. It's just done once per day. So we actually go up to the roof, or I go up to the roof, and observe the stacks. Right now, because there's two different stacks, we monitor at two different points unless one of the stacks is not in operation.
Right. What you're observing then, would it be considered the particulates, the matter?
During the time, I mean, I've never seen spewing of particulates. All I see is steam, or what I translate to be steam. Anything that I report would be something that looks beyond that to me. And what I interpret or would interpret that to be is any form of black smoke that may be coming out of the stacks, or an excessive amount of smoke. Like, for instance, on the 14th, when we saw just a lot of smoke in the area.
Now, isn't the particulate is like a solid matter, solid, invisible? Otherwise, when you clean the roof, what are you cleaning off? Solid matter?
I don't clean the roof.
Whoever's cleaned the roof, did they see, what are they cleaning?
They're just taking out the screens, cleaning the filters.
On the roof?
On the roof.
The filters are on the roof?
Yes, and the stacks on the roof.
So there's nothing on the surface of the roof that you in fact clean?
I would not be able to answer that question.
They clean the roof.
Well, our roof is on a daily, monthly cleaning schedule.
Daily?
I'm not, yes.
Then what are they cleaning is what I'm saying. Are they cleaning a substance?
I'm sorry, can you, I'm not understanding the question.
What are they removing from the roof when they're cleaning the roof? They're removing something. What are they removing?
My understanding is that they are removing the filters. They are replacing them with new ones, cleaning out the filters, and picking up around the area.
So they're not cleaning the surface of the roof then at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Anyone aware of that?
They do clean it?
If you don't know and
I
you want to
don't know.
defer to a different witness,
anyone
you
would
can do
know.
that.
I can
You
defer
can
to
do that
Armando.
too.
Yes.
Would anyone know?
Well, we don't do the cleaning.
I'm sorry, can you just identify yourself just for the audio record?
Armando Ayala.
Thank you.
I'm going to answer that question. We don't do the cleaning. The maintenance crew doesn't do the cleaning. The sanitation cleaning is the one that does that cleaning, the filters, and they also maintaining the roof clean. I don't really know how bad it is. Doesn't look like that because they're doing the cleaning every hour right now. So it's not in a point where you could see any particulars on the roof.
If they're cleaning every hour, there could be some kind of a substance
Yeah, that's right.
on the roof surface, the top of the roof, that they can see
That's what you just
and
said.
see what's being effluent from the stack. It's steam, and could it be also a substance?
There's definitely a substance.
Sorry, can you identify
Yeah, I'm sorry.
yourself, please?
Herb Bowden. There's definitely a substance. We're only trapping about 75% of the particulate matter. So there is some grease that lands on the roof, and it is cleaned. I don't, there's definitely some, because we know the filters aren't trapping 100%. So there is some particulate matter that does escape, and it does land on the roof, and we do clean it.
Okay.
They're not in charge of cleaning the roof. Sanitation is, but we definitely do clean it, and there is definitely some residue that happens, for sure.
I'm just trying to get a definitive answer as whether or not, in fact, if it's true, how do you emit particles into the atmosphere? At what point do they get into the atmosphere or settle on the rooftop?
Okay, I thought I answered that, but I'll answer it again. We're not trapping 100%. The two filters, even though we have two back-to-back, they say they trap 75%. We assume the second filter is trapping additional, but there is some particulate matter that still gets emitted, and it does land on the roof. The temperature that it comes out of the stack is about 110 to 120 degrees, and so some of it probably doesn't land on the roof. Maybe it lands in the parking lot, but I don't know that. But whatever lands in the area is being cleaned daily by our sanitation crew.
So you can measure the particulates, but you can't measure the emission level of the gases because gases are not visible.
No, that's true, and it shows up in our calculation that we are emitting daily 19 pounds per day on VOCs and 12 pounds per day on PMs.
It's not
That's
visible.
what was good. I understand that, and that's why we have the variance.
It's not visible.
Okay. Any other questions?
And this is for Mr. Ayala. Just want to confirm that once the new ESP is replaced and stuff, the bypass is shut off, sealed, or how do you, the bypass unit, how do you prevent it from being used?
We have closing valves that we use electronically, and so we could close them. But we could seal them if
No, is it automatically?
yeah,
if
it's automatic.
If it's
Yeah,
going
the-
through the main, it won't go through the bypass?
the RTO will not work if that valve is open.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. There's some
Yeah,
preventive.
the RTO needs to have that signal closed so they can work,
Okay,
because then they will not be absorbing nothing and it will create a bigger problem.
right, yeah, because we do have some facilities that use the bypass and have problems with it.
Oh, yeah,
So-
it's just,
Okay, so you have,
I understand that, yeah.
okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions before we close the record? Okay. Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard today? I see none. Mr. Bowden, would you like to give closing remarks?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Reichart, do you have a closing statement?
Yes, I did have a few requested changes for the conditions, and I know we had discussed others. The district is not opposed to adding in a requirement regarding the submission of the permit applications for the city. Additionally, the district would like to add an additional notification requirement, either to number 7, condition number 7, or after it, requesting, and I can read out what I've drafted. I'd like to define after electrostatic precipitator, parentheses, G43879, a second parentheses, defining that as ESP, and then that would complete that sentence. And then the next sentence would say, petitioner shall notify via email AQ Inspector 2, Vanessa Tannick, V. Tannick at aqmd.gov, that same beginning sentence, of the shutdown of the ESP to commence its replacement, and of the completion of the replacement of the ESP. Do you need me to repeat that, or did we get that?
Did you put a time frame of notification in there?
I did not.
Okay.
If you, I don't know if you, it'd be within 24 hours, so I don't know if we want to add that to each sentence, or we could add a sentence at the end that said, these notifications should occur within 24 hours of the triggering event.
That sounds good.
I had a question. Were you also going to put a condition or regarding during that 3 to 5 days that they go back to the existing system to control the PM emissions?
Well, that would be all the conditions that are still in place, those would apply during that 3 to 5 day
They
period.
will apply.
All of these other ones will still apply during that 5-day period. And then I had one additional condition regarding the submission of our permit application. And so that would be added at some point. Petitioner shall submit the permit application to the district for the replacement of the ESP and request and pay for expedited processing no later than April 5th, 2019. And then one other note is just the date change in number 8. It says March 26th, so that date would need to be changed regarding excess emissions. And then, subject to compliance with the proposed conditions, the district is not opposed to a granting of this variance.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Just,
oh.
I'm looking at the conditions, there isn't a specific condition saying that they should vent it through the mesh filters, because it says you have to clean it and so forth, but there isn't a specific condition saying, you should use the mesh filters and none that I can see, So that'll ensure that, during the fire, also that,
I think that's fair. Yeah, we refer to the mesh filters, but we don't actually require it. So perhaps at the beginning of condition number 4, and then we can say during the same language, I don't remember the exact language that the chair.
For any day petitioner is not in full compliance with district rules and regulations?
That would be the beginning.
Okay.
Petitioner shall vent all emissions through the metal mesh filters. And that's it. I think that's sufficient, right? Period. And then continue on. Petitioner shall replace cooking oil, et cetera.
Okay, good point. Okay, thank you. I'll start.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, we're going to have discussion.
The previous hearing, you want to adopt those testimony from the previous hearing?
We did that already
We
at the
did?
very beginning.
All right.
Okay, so, and jumping off from that, I'll just begin discussion. Based on the evidence and testimony and our findings from the prior hearing on the interim variance, we were able to find both that petitioner obviously is or will be in violation of district rule or regulation, and that obviously is the fact that the ESP was burned in the fire, and that requirement that they vent to pollution control device in full use cannot be complied with. We also were able to find that it was beyond their reasonable control, and we based that on the fire itself and on the history and on the lack of previous issues that were similar. And I'm not going to go completely into our findings, but I'm going to rely on our findings that were more specific for the interim variance. We also were able to find an arbitrary or unreasonable taking of property, and for that similar reason in terms of, we heard at the last hearing, that with Cinco de Mayo coming up, this is a very busy time of year, and in order to fulfill contracts, they need to keep operating during a relatively lengthy amount of time during that period that they need to repair and then replace the ESP, and that there would be quite significant losses during that time, and potential layoffs, now that it would be a longer period of time than the interim variance was. I'm also able to find that that closing or taking, it's a taking, would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. First of all, we heard, I believe that this petitioner is being extremely diligent. I think doing the repair as soon as possible, even though they're going to be replacing the ESP, is really weighing in their favor. And and also we heard at the last hearing that the amount of excess emissions, which we heard this hearing are conservative given the change in the filters, are well below the even the minimum for excess emission fees. And so, relatively speaking, given the quite significant losses, I believe that I can make that finding, that it would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. And it won't be for the entire length, which I'll talk about, but it won't be for the entire length of the variance anyway. Curtailing operations, they are doing that. They are agreeing still to the continuing limit on operations when not in full compliant, but there's no way they could curtail short of completely shutting down in lieu of a variance. So I can make that finding. And then, of course, reducing excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible. As I stated just a few minutes ago, just the fact that they're doing this in 2 phases. And phase 1, hopefully, will be completed sometime in mid-April. Is a great way of reducing excess emissions to the maximum extent feasible, because once that repair is done, they will be for a period of time in full compliance, even though they will be out again to do that ultimate replacement, and that is certainly reducing excess emissions. In addition, they took it upon themselves to both investigate and then use even better filters, which are, they estimate according to the manufacturer's spec, getting 75% reduction as opposed to 50%. So that and the agreement to limit operations and throughput, all of that is certainly reducing to the maximum extent feasible. And I just want to draw our attention once again. I did ask at the last hearing whether there were any temporary devices that could be used, a temporary ESP, and I recall that the answer was something about the volume doesn't allow for, it's too great of a volume for a temporary replacement. And so I can make that finding of to the maximum extent feasible. And monitoring will continue to take place in accordance with the terms of, or the proposed terms of the short variance. And so with that, I can make all the findings. Anyone else wish to add? Mr. Balagopalan?
Yeah, I think I can do that, make that finding also. And in addition, I think specifically the steps they've taken to curtail emissions during the variance period is to be lauded. You know, they have, I didn't realize the last hearing that was a bypass stack, and that's where they had put the trays. But I think that's come use, having the bypass stack, they can continue to use that when they're doing the swap of the old ESP with the new ESP and still take the 50% reduction PM from that. And the fact that they're also spending some additional amount of money to repair the existing ESP while they wait for the new one, I think that's taking really good steps to reduce emission to the maximum extent possible. So I think in all those cases, I think, and the fact that they're willing to do some, I mean, if there is a new permit or not, that they also will be doing some testing after the system is installed. And I appreciate that they're looking into the carbon. I didn't mean a carbon filter, but granular carbon, but that's all right. As long as the vendor says it's not feasible, you know, that's good to get the feedback, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Berg?
Yes, I do believe that we can make all the, I can make all the findings. There were some items that the facility was charged to investigate, and they did. I think they've taken a proactive approach. The equipment's been shipped, and the crew's already preparing for it, so that's a plus. But I also want to add that there is major incentive for them to take necessary steps because one of the reasons that they wanted this variance was because Cinco de Mayo was coming, and that is an incentive to get things rolling and back in place and able to produce as much as possible. So I can make all the findings.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, Senator?
I was looking for a condition hardship if you're not granted the variance. I don't see what the question is raised, what hardship would be.
We received testimony on that at the
yeah.
last hearing.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't see it as a question.
That was when I talked about the arbitrary and unreasonable taking of property.
Okay, fine, right, because the amount of money that they would lose, the contracts they have in place, and the number of people whose jobs would be in jeopardy is another good reason why they continue to operate. I would also say that in condition number 5, we talk about the excess emission to the maximum extent. By incorporating the new filters from 1 inch to 2 inch would, of course, restrict the particulates PM from being emitted from the system. Yes, that would do that.
I'm sorry, are you talking about finding number 3?
The 5.
I mean 5, finding number 5?
Yeah.
Okay, because you said condition number 5 and
I'm sorry, I mean
I was
finding.
confused. Thank you.
Finding number 5 would eliminate a substantial part of the PMs from being emitted into the roof area, for an example. However, I still am fixed on the definition of emission. Emission would be PM, particular matter, and it's not gaseous. That you could see, particular matter, but you can't see the gas which is going to be emitted from the particular matter once it hits the atmosphere. So that's something you cannot measure or see with the naked eye, but that's okay as long as you define what the emission levels are, which is PM. Correct? Okay, thank you.
The excess emissions are actually PM and VOCs. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, then I'm going to make a motion, and I'm going to go very slow when we get to the proposed variance conditions. There are a lot of changes. In the matter of Del Real LLC, case number 5754-2, I move that we grant the requested short variance to begin today and go for 90 days from the original ex parte variance, which is March 6, 2019. So for 90 days from March 6, 2019, or until final compliance and final installation and operation of the Phase 2 replacement ESP, whichever occurs first. So final compliance or 90 days from March 6th. And just to be clear, there will be 2 non-consecutive periods in that overall short variance period, including first, until Phase 1 repair is completed, and the second, an approximate 5-day time period for installation of the new replacement ESP. Those are the 2 times during the short variance period that petitioner will be out of compliance. It will be at the location of 11041 Inland Avenue in Harupa Valley. I might be saying that wrong. 91752, and it is for the same equipment that was. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. Sorry. That is in the interim, listed in the interim variance, so the ESP on that device number is listed, the frying system 1 and frying system 2. It is from Rule 203B and particularly from permit condition number 3 of permit to operate numbers G43885 and G43886 with regard to emitting through a system that is in full operation. I further move that we include the short variance conditions that were proposed in Exhibit C. And I will slowly go over the proposed changes to make sure we get them all. Okay, to condition number 1, we would begin that condition with the new words, "For any day, petitioner is not in full compliance with district rules and regulations, comma." So to be clear, that condition will only apply for the times during the short variance period that there is not full compliance with rules and regulations of the district. Condition number 2, we are removing the words "if feasible." So condition 2 will just begin with petitioner shall not fry its boucher product. And one more change to condition number 2 is to change the word interim for interim variance to short variance. So during the short variance period. I believe number 3 stays as was. Number 4 will begin with the words, "For any day, petitioner is not in full compliance with district rules and regulations, comma, petitioner shall vent all emissions through the metal mesh filters, period." And then what is already in condition 4 will just remain as the second sentence of condition 4. Condition 5, I believe, remains as was. Condition 6, I believe, remains as was. Condition 7 will now, there were several changes, let's see. First, I believe we are after the parentheses with G43879, we're adding open parentheses, quote, ESP, unquote, all capitals, close parentheses, just to define the electrostatic precipitator as ESP. And then adding a new sentence. Hold on, I want to make sure. I've got all these things. I don't know which one goes there. Yes, petitioner shall notify via email, AQ, capitals, Inspector to Vanessa Tarek with her email of the shutdown of the ESP to commence its replacement and the completion of the replacement of the ESP. Hopefully that's correct. Period. No, then we'll add a sentence at the end of that, number 7. These notifications will occur within 24 hours of the triggering event, period. Okay, then we're going to add, as number 8, petitioner shall submit the permit application to the district for the replacement of the ESP and request and pay for expedited processing no later than April 5th, 2019, period. And then I believe we can do this, I think what I'll do is, my motion will be to give a week for this. New number 9. Petitioner shall apply to the city, and I'm just going to ask real quick, is it the city of Harupa Valley? Okay, the city of Harupa Valley for the necessary city permits for the repair of the ESP.
Sure, if they need that for the repair, I think it's for the new installation.
I heard on testimony it was the repair. I'm sorry, can we reopen
Sorry.
let's reopen, let's make sure, okay? I have 3 members that agree, yes, okay, 3 members. Want to make sure we're getting the right permits here. The question had been, was it for the repair?
Yes, the repair includes the ducts and the ESP.
Okay, so, and the city permits that are required are for that?
That's right.
Okay, we'll close it back up. Okay. By, and let's say, well, let's give a week, by April 2nd, 2019. And we need to change what was condition 8, which will now be condition 10. We need to change the date. What is 15 days from today, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Bruzak, can I point out?
Let me finish the entire motion, and then we'll get a second, and then we'll take discussion on the motion. Okay, so we will put in what is now 10, what was 8, replace March 26th with April 9th, 2019. Excess emissions are the same, although to be determined, and they will take place on any day petitioner is not in full compliance with district rules and regulations. And that completes my motion. Is there a second before we take discussion? Senator seconds the motion. Discussion, Mr. Balagopalan.
Just pointing out, when I look at the timeline, that's why I was confused. The city permit, and I realize they need the city permit for the new fire suppression system, the new smog ESP. If you look at the installation of the new duct is commencing, and the smog rebuild is actually showing before the city permit application.
The city permit is for the repair.
When you say repair, you mean the
Repair of the existing
well, if you
ESP.
look at the timeline, the rebuild, it's actually, it's before they apply for the city permit.
When I asked in testimony, the response was they plan to apply tomorrow. When we asked, how much time do you need? They said by the end of the week would be fine. We gave them an entire week. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I think they've already
Let's
shown.
not go to them first, but again.
No, I think they showed the drawing, they've already put in the new duct, I think, some of it, they showed us the drawing. So I don't know if that needed city approval or not to replace the existing, that didn't, right? And to repair the existing, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Don't ask questions,
Yeah, don't
yes,
ask
unless we reopen it, because we need to.
Yeah, so that's all, I think they did the new duct without having to get the city permit because it's just a replacement of existing duct that have burnt out. And then to repair the ESP, it looks like they can go forward without getting the city permit. But for the new system, they need to get city permits and approval.
Testimony was, and we reopened again, they require city permits to complete the repair. And so we're making sure those city permits are applied for as soon as possible. That's the purpose of that
I'm okay
condition.
with that, yeah, I've just, that's some discrepancy with the timeline, that's all, but,
And I assume that they're doing it in accordance with the city rules and requirements. And that was the testimony we received, so. Any other discussion, though? So that makes sense to you? Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Oh, did you have discussion on the motion?
Before we vote, I just want to say, if I'm in order, to compliment the petitioner for the job well done, bar charts. We've asked for them before. They didn't know what I was talking about. But you obviously you did it in advance. Congratulations.
Thank you. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, Mr. Balagopalan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Senator, you vote?
Aye.
And I vote yes. Motion passes 4-0. And I reiterate the sentiments of the senator. Well done in terms of preparation for today, and we appreciate that very much. And good luck.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Appreciate it. Thanks
thank you
again.
all. Any other business for today, board members? Okay, if not, we are adjourned. Thank you.